The film begins with a young woman waking up in a boat that has taken on water. The boat appears to be wrecked, and she has visible wounds on her body. She immediately gets up, frantically searching for her partner, Richard, while looking terrified. As she climbs onto the deck, she realizes she is stranded in the middle of the open ocean. Then, she notices that Richard's safety harness is unbuckled, causing her to break down in hysterical tears. The scene then flashes back to 5 months earlier. A beautiful young woman named Tami is seen sailing toward an island in France called Tahiti. Upon arriving, she hands over her identification card, and a security officer asks about her purpose for visiting. Tami responds that she is looking for any job, as long as it pays for her to enjoy her time there. The officer allows her to enter. Tami starts working at the harbor alongside her colleague, Deb. She introduces herself, saying she is from California and previously worked as a cook on a sailing yacht, but her contract ended and she had no desire to return home. Tami dreams of sailing across the horizon, which is why she came to Tahiti, to take a break while earning some extra money. After finishing work, she enjoys the beautiful ocean view by surfing. Later, Tami and Deb notice a boat approaching with a man on board who playfully flirts with them, hoping they will help him. Deb asks the meaning of the boat's name, and the man explains that Myaluga means one who crosses the horizon. The two women approach his boat to assist him, and the man introduces himself as Richard. As they continue chatting, Richard seems particularly interested in Tami, and the feeling is mutual. The next day, Tami becomes even more curious about Richard, especially because of his boat's intriguing name. She watches him from a distance as he works on repairing his vessel. Eventually, she approaches him to lend a hand, and they have a deeper conversation. Richard invites her to have dinner on his boat that night, and she gladly accepts. That evening, they meet on Richard's boat as planned. Tami is amazed by his collection of photographs from his travels. Richard shares that he built the boat himself while working at a shipyard in South Africa. As they eat, Tami asks what it feels like to sail the ocean. Richard explains that everything comes at a price: hunger, sunburns, seasickness, even hallucinations, but none of it compares to the satisfaction of the journey. Tami then confesses that she dreams of living as a sailor and spending her life at sea. Hearing this, Richard immediately invites her to sail with him the next day. Overjoyed, Tami eagerly accepts his offer. The next day, Richard deliberately lets Tami steer the boat, even though she has no experience. She looks thrilled, quickly proving that she is a fast learner as she skillfully navigates the vessel. They continue their adventure together, enjoying their time in nature. One day, Tami takes Richard to a beautiful hidden waterfall deep in the forest. Upon arriving, she immediately jumps into the water, but Richard hesitates, worried she might be swept away. He quickly follows, diving in to look for her, only to realize that Tami is an excellent swimmer. They reunite and share a playful moment in the water. Later, they head to a beach, where Richard takes out his camera and snaps pictures of Tami to capture the moment. They spend a romantic time together, surrounded by the breathtaking scenery. The scene then shifts back to the present. On the damaged boat, Tami struggles to survive. She desperately tries to use the boat's radio to call for help, but it doesn't work. She repeatedly scans the horizon with her binoculars, searching for land, but finds nothing, leaving her in despair. Suddenly, she spots an overturned small boat through the binoculars and becomes convinced that Richard must be there. This gives her the motivation to reach the location, but her boat's engine is dead, forcing her to fix the sail. While discarding a torn sail into the water, Tami accidentally gets pulled under and falls into the ocean. She struggles to surface, but within moments, her boat drifts far from her. Fortunately, being a skilled swimmer, she manages to catch up to it quickly. She then patches the boat's holes with duct tape, pumps out the water inside, and carefully sets up the sails using the techniques she had learned before. Tami successfully gets the boat moving again with the wind. As she sails toward the small, overturned boat, she dries all the important fabric she has. Eventually, she reaches the boat and finds Richard still alive. She immediately lowers the sails and secures herself with a safety rope to rescue him. Thanks to her quick thinking, Richard is saved, though he remains weak and severely injured, particularly in his leg. The scene then flashes back to a romantic moment before their departure. While strolling at a party, Richard picks a flower and shows it to Tami, explaining that placing it behind the left ear signifies a romantic commitment. As they drink together, Tami opens up about her past. She reveals that she was born when her mother was only 15 years old, but her maternal grandparents rejected her, so she was raised by her paternal grandparents. She rarely saw her parents and never felt any attachment to them. She explains that she often ran away as a child, longing for adventure and to explore the world on her own. She hasn't been home in 5 years and doesn't plan to return. After sharing her story, Tami stands up and asks Richard to dance with her. They join other couples on the dance floor, holding each other closely. Richard then asks Tami if she would like to sail around the world with him. Without hesitation, she joyfully says yes. The next day, the couple is seen shopping for food supplies when they suddenly run into Richard's old friends, Kristin and Peter. Tami introduces herself, and the two friends invite them for coffee. Peter and Kristin bring good news. They offer Richard a job sailing their boat back to San Diego, California. As payment, they are willing to give him $10,000 plus a first-class ticket home. It's an excellent offer, but Richard insists on accepting only if they provide 2 tickets so he can bring Tami along. However, Tami doesn't seem thrilled about the offer. Later, she sits alone at the harbor, deep in thought. Richard approaches her, trying to comfort her. Tami admits that she doesn't want to go back to California. She understands that this offer is a great opportunity for Richard, but she doesn't want to be part of it. Hearing this, Richard apologizes and promises that he won't take her to California against her will. Back in the present, Richard is lying injured on the boat while Tami does her best to treat his wounded leg. Richard is in immense pain, and it turns out that he also has severe rib injuries. After 2 days adrift at sea, Tami tries everything she can to get them back to land. However, after making calculations, she realizes that their boat has drifted too far off course, about 1,500 miles from where they should be. She becomes devastated upon realizing that they are outside any shipping or flight routes, meaning no one is likely to find them. But Richard encourages her to keep going, and she resumes calculating their best course of action. Tami measures the boat's speed, and Richard estimates that they could reach San Diego in 25 days if they maintain a steady pace with favorable winds. Unfortunately, the ocean currents are not in their favor, meaning the journey could take months. Looking at the map, Tami finds another option, sailing toward Hawaii, where the wind currents would help them reach land faster. However, Richard warns her that if they miss Hawaii, their next stop would be Japan, which is 5,000 miles away, a distance they wouldn't survive. Weighing the risks, Tami decides to steer the boat toward Hawaii. The scene flashes back again to the past, continuing the story of their departure. Richard and Tami are invited aboard Peter's yacht, where the 4 of them chat. Peter and Kristin reveal that they must return to London due to Peter's father's illness. They then give Richard and Tami a tour of their luxurious boat, leaving them both in awe. Later, when Richard and Tami are alone, Richard explains that if they accept this offer, they would have enough money to travel freely for an entire year. They could sail the ocean as much as they wanted. Hearing this, Tami changes her mind and decides to go with Richard to California. The next day, Tami sits in a restaurant writing a letter to her mother. In the letter, she says that she will be visiting California soon and wants to introduce Richard to the family. She also mentions her new special job, sailing a rich couple's yacht to San Diego. Back in the present, Tami gathers the remaining food supplies, realizing they won't be enough to sustain them. Despite this, they ration their meals, savoring peanut butter to keep themselves going. 5 days pass, and the couple realizes they have drifted off course. Tami is confident in her calculations, yet things aren't going as expected. Suspicious that something might be wrong with the boat's rudder, she decides to dive into the ocean to inspect it. Underwater, she discovers a tangled sail stuck beneath the boat, which has been slowing them down. Using all her strength, she manages to free it and climbs back aboard. 10 days go by, and Tami continues searching for anything useful. She finds a bottle of skin cream which could help protect their sunburned skin. She applies it to Richard, whose skin is peeling from prolonged sun exposure. Seeing Richard's worsening injuries makes Tami even more distressed, but she remains determined to take care of him. Reassessing their food supply, Tami realizes they won't last another week. Their water reserves are also critically low. Richard suggests she catch fish using a spear, but Tami refuses. She is vegan and cannot bring herself to kill an animal even in desperation. However, Richard reminds her that in life or death situations, sometimes sacrifices must be made. Accepting this harsh reality, Tami jumps into the water determined to catch some fish. She throws the spear repeatedly but keeps missing. Frustrated, she tries again with all her strength, yet she fails every time. Overwhelmed with hopelessness, Tami climbs back onto the boat, breaking down in Richard's arms. Feeling the immense pressure, Tami strips off her clothes and meditates at the edge of the boat. Her sunburned skin glows red under the scorching heat, but as she sits in deep concentration, something unexpected happens. Rain begins to fall. Overjoyed, she and Richard rush to collect as much water as possible. 18 days pass with no sign of land. Tami, mentally drained, stumbles upon a bottle of wine and some cigarettes inside the boat. Excited to find a small escape, she brings them to the deck. She and Richard drink together, hoping to distract themselves from their dire reality, even if only for a few hours. Tami also discovers a perfectly intact guitar and begins playing to lift her spirits. Richard watches her and tells her that everything happening is because of his decision. But Tami reassures him that this experience is something she will never forget. This triggers another flashback. Richard once sang to Tami to charm her. She pretended to enjoy it, teasing him afterward. She then asked about his mother, and Richard revealed that she had died by suicide when he was only 7 years old. He never understood why, but he still feels her presence with him. Richard then compares Tami to his mother, and in a heartfelt moment, gives her an expensive ring, promising to marry her. Overwhelmed with happiness, Tami joyfully accepts his proposal. Back in the present, the couple has now been adrift at sea for 29 days. That night, as they sleep, Tami is suddenly awakened by the sound of a massive ship approaching right in front of their boat. Seeing this, she rushes to fire a flare gun to signal for help. Despite firing multiple flares, the large ship does not respond and simply passes by. Tami shouts desperately, confused and frustrated, but in the blink of an eye, the ship vanishes. Richard gently wakes her, revealing that she was only hallucinating. Tami breaks down in hysterical sobs, while Richard, exhausted and hopeless, admits that he no longer believes they will make it. He tells Tami to make the most of the time she has left. As the days pass, Richard's condition worsens. He is too dehydrated to sit up. Tami carefully gives him a small sip of water, trying to keep him alive. She encourages him, saying they are only about 700 miles away from Hawaii. She begs him to stay strong because they are so close, but Richard is too weak. He just wants to sleep. Tami does everything she can to keep him awake. The scene flashes back to the past, to the moment when Tami and Richard first set sail across the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly, a land bird crashes into their boat, an ominous sign of an incoming storm. Richard checks the navigation system and receives troubling news. A massive storm is brewing about 1,000 miles ahead. He hopes it will dissipate in a few hours, but as a precaution, they decide to alter their course to avoid it. However, after hours of sailing, they find themselves heading straight into the storm. With no other options, they prepare for the worst. Darkness surrounds them as towering waves crash against their boat. Dressed in protective gear, they work together to battle the raging sea. They manage to hold their ground for a while, but the storm only grows more violent. Realizing they might not survive, Richard instructs Tami to secure an emergency position beacon to each of them. The boat's sails are continuously ripped apart by the relentless wind. Then a monstrous wave looms in front of them. Acting quickly, Richard orders Tami to retreat inside the cabin while he struggles to control the boat. But before he can react, the powerful wave engulfs them, flipping the boat completely. Tami is thrown inside the cabin, while Richard is violently swept into the ocean, his emergency beacon still blinking in the dark waters. Back in the present, Tami and Richard have now endured 33 days without rescue. Tami tries to comfort Richard by pointing out the beauty of the red morning sky, but Richard warns her that a red sky in the morning is a bad omen for sailors. The next day, Tami grows anxious, fearing an approaching storm, so she builds a shelter using the sail. Fortunately, only a light drizzle falls. To keep herself from losing hope, she tells Richard stories from her childhood to keep him awake. She shares how she used to lock herself in the bathroom whenever her parents fought, pretending she was somewhere else. Meeting Richard, she says, finally made her feel what it's like to truly escape to an unfamiliar place. As the days drag on, they both grow silent, resigned to their fate. Richard calls Tami's name, but she is weak and exhausted. She lays down, whispering that she has accepted everything. But when she wakes up, Richard is gone. At that moment, Tami realizes the heartbreaking truth. She has been alone this entire time. Richard never survived the storm. He was lost at sea the night of the disaster. Tami recalls Richard's words about how hunger and exhaustion could cause hallucinations. Flashbacks reveal that she had been talking to herself, repairing the boat alone, fishing alone, and playing the guitar all by herself. On day 41, as she drifts through the endless ocean, a land bird suddenly appears. Tami quickly grabs her binoculars and spots land in the distance. Desperate not to miss this chance, she fires a flare gun for help. Seeing no immediate response, she shoots another flare. This time, a Japanese research vessel notices her and approaches. As the crew rescues her, Tami finally feels a sense of relief. She has survived. A few days later, Tami returns to Tahiti and visits Richard's boat, Maialuga, the place where all their memories remain. Looking through their photos and reminiscing about their time together, she breaks down in tears. She takes the flower Richard once gave her and walks to the beach where they had their first date. The film is inspired by a true story, and real photos of Tami and Richard from 1983 appear on screen. It is revealed that Richard, who was 33 years old, was lost to the storm, while Tami, at 24, survived alone at sea for 41 days aboard the Hazana. The final scene shows the real Tami, who continues to sail to this day. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.